In a bit of an update in the Vince McMahon lawsuit news, The Rock and John Cena have both been called out by Janelle Grant's lawyer, expressing extreme disappointment at the fact that they are still associated, yes, still associated with Vince McMahon even after the allegations. We're going to go and read through a brand new NBC article that outlines what Vince McMahon's life is like post WWE resignation, what it's like and who he's meeting with, who he's still talking to. And the three names that jump out immediately once you read it: Donald Trump, John Cena, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So we're going to take a quick look at this article. Before I do, though, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right, so as I said, there was a brand new article from NBC News that just came out that talks about Vince McMahon's life post WWE. Title of the article is Vince McMahon's Life After WWE, Kittens, Vacations, and Staying in Touch with Trump. This is written by Chloe Malas and Alex Sherman from CNBC. Starts off by saying, as he faces a mountain of legal woes, former WWE leader Vince McMahon is traveling, eating out, and keeping in touch with friends and associates, including former President Donald Trump. McMahon resigned as executive chairman of WWE's parent company almost 3 months ago after a former employee, Janelle Grant, accused him in a bombshell lawsuit of sexual abuse and trafficking. He denied these allegations. McMahon, 78, is also facing a federal criminal investigation, although he hasn't been charged. NBC News and CNBC talked to 11 people familiar with McMahon and WWE about how he's spending his time now and how the global brand he built for more than 4 decades is moving on without him. These people include close personal associates and company insiders who declined to be named, citing ongoing legal cases and the confidential nature of internal corporate communications. Multiple WWE insiders said he hasn't had any contact with the company leaders and figureheads since he resigned. Mark Shapiro, the operating chief of WWE's parent company, TKO Holdings, said in March that McMahon, quote, doesn't work for the company, doesn't come into the office, and he's not coming back to the company. That also means McMahon hasn't talked to his son-in-law, WWE creative chief and former superstar, Paul Triple H Levesque, or daughter Stephanie McMahon Levesque regarding company matters, sources said. While she introduced WWE's WrestleMania event earlier this year, McMahon Levesque, who worked beside her father for more than 20 years and played roles in storylines, currently has no involvement with the company, according to people familiar with the matter. All right. So let's stop right there. We'll come back to it. But this is an important note to take awareness of, because we have thought about, how is Vince McMahon, communicating? Is he communicating with people? The thought always was for many fans that potentially McMahon was somehow back-channeling stuff, which was true back in 2023 when he kind of forced his way back into the company and he was still obviously having meetings. There was still creative input, and Triple H even said as much in one of those press conferences and those media scrums that McMahon was still, there if he ever needed him, and, he provides ideas, and he was pretty open about it. But this makes it explicit, and I truly believe that a lot of this is the TKO influence, because TKO wants to be clear. This man, Vince McMahon, has absolutely nothing to do with either TKO or WWE. Nothing. They do not want to be associated with him. They don't care whether you're related to him, in the case of Paul Levesque or Stephanie McMahon. They don't care if you're Nick Khan and he brought you into WWE and you have this relationship with him. They could not give less of a crap, because they know what everyone else basically knows, and that is that Vince McMahon in 2024 is a toxic brand. He is a toxic brand to be associated with. He's a toxic person to have in your locker room. Go back and think about all of the stories that we have heard, from Mick Foley to Josh Matthews to Jim Ross everyone who's been on behind that commentary stage, or that commentary table, has said the same thing. Vince McMahon is a bully. He berates you. He belittles you, breaks you down. He did as much to Renee Young. This is someone who is used to be an abusive person. He's used to having the power to be abusive. We know about the allegations going back to Rita Chatterton. We know about the allegations going back to even the Ring Boy scandal back in the 90s. Like, these are things that happen under his watch and many times by him. So if you're looking at that whole picture, and then there's this big lawsuit that everyone is talking about, that you're associated with, if you're TKO, you would never want this man back. And you would want to make it clear to all of the WWE executives that this person should not, cannot, and will not be welcome back in any capacity. Because if that is the case, then you're out. And I do think that is a hard line they're going to draw. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult to create that line when you're dealing with people who are family members of McMahon, but it's just the line that I think TKO is at. So let's continue reading this NBC article. So you can see this is McMahon from a UFC event back in 2022. Article goes on to say, McMahon is nonetheless unindelibly inked with the wrestling outfit, which he bought from his father 42 years ago. Still, he seems to have moved on, according to multiple sources. McMahon has kept up his routines, and it's as if he's unfazed by his legal fights, two sources said. For instance, on an afternoon in late March, McMahon returned on a private plane to the United States from the sunny Turks and Caicos Islands, but he wasn't alone, according to a person close to him. He had with him, and this is where it gets interesting, he had with him 7 kittens and a puppy, all of which he brought back to be adopted by his friends. This person added, quote, if anything, he's enjoying life, unquote, said the person who added that McMahon had also taken a trip to Italy. All right. So this is the part of the title that everyone's referring to. Vince McMahon, kittens, puppies, and everything of the like. Look, Vince McMahon is a billionaire who has just cashed out a shit ton of money. Let's be honest. In addition to what he has received as compensation over the years, what he has saved up, the assets he has, the investments he has been selling TKO stock and offloading it like it's nobody's business. I just made a video the other day about how McMahon has sold or has listed all of the rest of his stock for sale. He is going to sell likely the rest of his shares in TKO, and he will have nothing, even on paper, to do with WWE after that. When you have that much money and you are somehow getting even more money now, you're going to spend it. And it should be no surprise that McMahon, who's a billionaire, is spending his time enjoying life, even though, of course, he's caused a lot of harm in his life. But that should be to no surprise to anyone. Goes on to say, Jessica Rosenberg, an attorney for McMahon, declined to comment regarding the aspects of the former WWE chief's life reported in this article. In an email statement Tuesday, however, she criticized Grant's suit. Quote, the lawsuit claims are false, defamatory, and entirely without merit. We intend to vigorously defend Mr. McMahon and are confident that he will be vindicated. The statement by the lawyer there is very reminiscent of a statement that McMahon released very close to the time that he had to resign from WWE and around the time that the lawsuit first came out. Like, it's using the same words. These, this lawsuit is defamatory, without merit, vigorously defend, like all the buzzwords that lawyers like to use, McMahon used in his original statement. So it's just restating what we already knew. Life and litigation. So this is a section that goes into more into the actual lawsuit as well. The details of McMahon's life after the WWE reign present a stark contrast to Grant's accusations, which paint a graphic portrait, of a violent and controlling man. In the federal lawsuit filed on January 25th, Grant's attorney said that she was, quote, the victim of physical and emotional abuse, sexual assault, and trafficking at WWE, unquote. naming McMahon and former WWE executive John Laurinaitis. Both men have denied these allegations in the suit. The lawsuit also named WWE as a defendant. WWE and its parent company, TKO, have said that they take Grant's allegations, quote, very seriously, unquote. Now, this is from the lawsuit, quote, this is from the attorney, quote, Vince McMahon raped, trafficked, and physically assaulted Janelle Grant as part of his decades-long normalization of treating women within WWE as objects. He might have thought that Janelle would just walk away, but that wishful thinking couldn't be farther from the case, unquote. Ann Callis, an attorney for Grant, said in a statement on Wednesday, quote, every day we are focused on adding to our mountain of evidence, speaking with other victims, hiring renowned experts on sex trafficking / coercive control, and preparing to vociferously litigate this case. Federal investigators seized a phone from McMahon and have been trying to determine whether the federal law was broken in the conduct surrounding Grant's allegations. NBC reported in February. WWE had disclosed last summer that investigators served McMahon with a federal grand jury subpoena and executed a search warrant in July. McMahon is cooperating with authorities, according to one of the people close to him. McMahon believes officials won't bring any charges against him and that Grant's civil case will be settled out of court, said one person close to the former wrestling executive. So we just went through a lot there. We went through McMahon and his thoughts on the lawsuit. We also went through a very determined statement from Janelle Grant's lawyer, Ms. Callis. So if you have read through the lawsuit, if you've seen the lawsuit, if you have seen the text messages, the evidence that was presented along with the filing, there is no doubt that Vince McMahon is at worst a manipulative and, quite frankly, disgusting person. Everyone's morals are different, but quite frankly, you look at it objectively, he's pretty gross. But when you take that into account and you also take into account the years and years of evidence that was already against McMahon in the form of alleged treatment towards women. We have discussed Rita Chatterton on this channel. We have discussed things like the handling of the Ashley Massaro investigation, or the Ashley Massaro incident, I should say, that was not properly investigated by WWE by all accounts. It seemed like that was just one of those things that happened, and no one was really there for Ashley. There was a meeting. McMahon allegedly knew something about it, but was not directly involved in that incident. But there's been that mishandling. There have been several NDAs that have been signed that really paint the picture of someone who not only, look, there are always going to be people who want their private lives private. However, when you have a track record that stinks as much as Vince McMahon's does, it raises eyebrows. And you combine that with a personality of McMahon that we all know to be abrasive and abusive at times, and a vibe check tells you things ain't good. Of course, innocent until proven guilty. But, I mean, as far as Vince McMahon's thoughts on the lawsuit go, it is interesting to try to talk about this, because people generally think when a lawsuit, gets, filed that, it's going to go to trial and you're going to have all this stuff. However, when you look at it, WWE, TKO, and Vince McMahon are both incentivized here to try to settle this out of court and make sure this just goes away. And it's going to be interesting to see how quickly that happens. We've been discussing this lawsuit for a while, and I've always said that if this does end up going to trial, it is going to be really bad for Vince McMahon and horrible for WWE. And if it doesn't, which is the likely scenario, then it's still going to be bad for McMahon, but not as bad for WWE, because they essentially get to move on. The stain might still be there. The stink might still be there. People might complain about it, but generally it's not going to be in the public conscience for as long. and that is a PR strategy. That is a strategy for WWE and their legal team, that they want to try to avoid the idea or the lawsuit being out there, people talking about it more things potentially coming out, people being subpoenaed. They don't want that, because that means they get dragged into this legal battle. That means that they have to continue to answer questions, and it takes away from their main objective, which is making money. That is, unfortunately, the capitalist system we live in. So, again, we're a long way from this being final. However, it does always seem, whenever you have these cases of rich people doing disgusting things, allegedly, it always seems like they are able to, essentially settle this, pay their way, and not deal with it again. And it's unfortunate. I know that Janelle Grant's attorneys have said that they do not want to engage in settlement talks with McMahon, which I think the article does go into, but that's a separate issue that we will see how well it rises up. Goes on to say, Nicole Bass, a spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, declined to comment. A spokesperson for Grant's attorney said that there have been absolutely no settlement talks with McMahon, so confirming that there have been no talks thus far. While his legal battles persist, McMahon is often ferried by a private driver from his posh Connecticut home to Manhattan, according to one of the sources close to him. There, he eats with his friends at restaurants such as old school Italian spot El Tenello East on 46th Street. I apologize for mispronouncing that. Sees his longtime barber for a bi-weekly haircut. Works with his personal trainers multiple times a week, the source said. Two other sources, however, said McMahon has otherwise been, quote, quite guarded, unquote, and often on the phone with his lawyers to map out plans since Grant's lawsuit was made public. This is an interesting point that I just want to point out. McMahon has always been someone who we've thought of as, he's a workaholic. He's someone who always wants to be doing stuff, it's almost as if he cannot sit still. And you would think that someone who's going through someone who is, being sued like McMahon is, with a lot of time on his hands, given the things we know of McMahon, like him being just a guy who always wants to be doing something, I could totally see this dude on the phone, mapping out strategies and changing those strategies. He's probably rewriting his lawyer strategies as much as he used to rewrite Raw. So there's that. Of course, that was allegedly. And here's the interesting part of this article that goes into who he's been in contact with. Staying in touch. McMahon also talked to Trump, according to two of the people close to the wrestling impresio. Oh my God, I don't even know what that word is. Impresiaro. The two billionaires have been in touch regularly, according to a person close to McMahon, although it isn't clear what they've discussed. Trump and the McMahon family, go way back. The former president hosted two WrestleMania events in Atlantic City in the late 1980s, engaged in a wrestling feud with McMahon in 2007, and is a member of the WWE Hall of Fame. Linda McMahon, McMahon's wife, served as the Small Business Administration head in Trump's cabinet and led a pro-Trump super PAC, and is now the board of a publicly traded Trump Media and Technology Group. In 2022, the Wall Street Journal reported that McMahon paid $5 million in previously unrecorded expenses to his since dissolved Donald J. Trump Foundation during the 2 years Trump appeared in WWE programming. As you can see, there's a picture of it right there. Trump, who's running for a second term as president, has also been accused of sexual assault and is facing his own costly pile of civil and criminal legal troubles. Including 4 separate indictments, Trump has denied wrongdoings in his various cases, pleading not guilty in each criminal proceeding, including the New York trial that started on Monday. All right. Another person close to McMahon said that the two men don't discuss their legal problems and that Trump doesn't give legal advice. Well, good for McMahon that doesn't happen. Hours after the publication of the story, a spokesperson hours after the publication of this story, a spokesperson for McMahon pushed back, saying, quote, McMahon has not been staying in touch or been in touch regularly with former President Trump. He has spoken with Mr. Trump once in the past several years, and that was for about a minute or so after McMahon's back surgery. Other than that, there have been no communications between the two, said the spokesperson. A Trump representative declined to comment. All right. That is the first I've ever heard of a Trump representative declining to comment on anything. So maybe it is true. Maybe they haven't talked. I mean, the Trump thing is like, I don't know how much time we need to spend on this part of it, but the Trump thing is what it is. Like, Donald Trump and McMahon have known each other for a long time. They have gone back, like the story says, to the 1980s. He was at WrestleMania 20. He hosted Raw. He owned Raw for a bit there in storyline, and he ended up being embroiled in the Battle of the Billionaires in the hair versus hair match back at WrestleMania 23 in 2007. So it's very, it's easy for any of us to see, like, okay, yeah, it's the guy who's going to be there. I do want to say this because people are going to automatically point to the Linda McMahon thing and say, like, there's this obvious, there's this obvious connection. I will say this, like, we are not sure how much Vince and Linda talk. By all accounts, they are basically separated, and their marriage is just for show at this point, just for paper. Like, they don't sleep, they don't spend time together, they have not been seen together. They are, by all intents and purposes, not together. McMahon has been very open about, his affairs and things like that. And look, that is someone's personal life, unless it becomes a matter of a lawsuit like it became here in the Janelle Grant case. Then it's not too much of our business, but it is a wrinkle here. Like, how much do we really take into account the Trump-Linda connection to McMahon? But I will say this. Vince McMahon is someone who has not shied away from Trump before. I doubt he would be shying away from him if he wasn't actually talking to him. So maybe he's actually telling the truth here for once. Who knows? Since he resigned, McMahon has been in touch with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena, sources said. Johnson and Cena, both Hollywood superstars, are two of the WWE's biggest success stories. Publicly, Johnson has thanked TKO and WWE executives regarding his addition to the TKO board earlier this year. In February, Cena told a radio host, Howard Stern, that, quote, the whole thing is super unfortunate and it sucks. That's a very underwhelming way of putting it. While noting that he loves McMahon and he has, quote, a great relationship, unquote, with him. But in the same breath, he added that at the time, I'm also a big advocate for accountability. Cena and Johnson are both represented by the William Morris Endeavor Agency, which is a part of Endeavor Group, the majority owner of TKO. A spokesperson for Johnson declined to comment. A representative for Cena did not respond to requests for comment. Another wrinkle to throw in here is, I believe back in 2022 it was, after McMahon had his original resignation, he hosted some sort of birthday party for himself, and one of the attendees was, in fact, Mr. Invisible himself, John Cena. So this is a very interesting part of this whole thing, of this whole article. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, because in addition to us finding out that, The Rock and Cena are still somehow close to McMahon, we have actually a statement from Janelle Grant's lawyer actually calling out Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena. So this is through Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. New comment from a spokesperson for Janelle Grant responding to NBC's reporting that Dwayne Johnson and John Cena are still in touch with Vince McMahon after his resignation. Quote, it's shameful that Mr. Johnson and Mr. Cena would associate themselves with an individual with decades of, the tweet is cut off there, however, finish it. It says, with decades of allegations just like Janelle's, behind the scenes support is louder than any public statement could ever be. So there you heard it. I mean, that was Janelle Grant's lawyer basically condemning Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena for their association with McMahon. Interesting thing here was No one really asked Johnson when he was at the WWE WrestleMania press conference about it. It would have been interesting if that had happened. Of course, there's only so many questions that can be asked. You can't blame members of the wrestling media, right, too much. But it is an interesting wrinkle to throw in there again, because this is the first time The Rock has really been dragged into this. He's now a member of the TKO board. And, one of the things we talked about earlier was, executives in the company not having any relationship really with Vince McMahon outside of obviously the case of Stephanie and Triple H. I'm sure that there's some sort of personal relationship there, at least a little bit. However, if it is true that The Rock is still frequently in touch with Vince McMahon, I think you could see, that being pulled back a lot, especially after this news came out, because right now, Rock is getting a lot of flack. Cena also getting a lot of flack online. And I know there are going to be people out there who say, well, oh my God, like they're friends with this guy. It is what it is. You can't be mad at people for being friends, whatever. That is understandable to an extent. However, if you look at it in an honest way, at a certain point, I don't know if I had a friend, hypothetically, that was accused of the things that Vince was accused of under the circumstances he was accused of, or if I even had a boss that I was close to, I think I could come up with something a little bit better than I have a great relationship with him, and the whole thing is super unfortunate. If this is a case of them standing by McMahon, essentially, I don't think it's going to look good in the long run. That's what I'll say. I think that it's a mistake on both of their parts. These are two of the most savvy actors and people in Hollywood, but this is a bad move. I'm telling you, it is not going to be good for them. Here we go. WWE in transition. This isn't the first time that WWE had to contend with a controversy stemming from its former longtime leader. McMahon was acquitted of federal criminal charges back in the 1990s related to the steroid scandal, and that engulfed the wrestling world at the time. In 2022, he briefly stepped down as WWE's leader after the Wall Street Journal, reported that he had paid millions of dollars to multiple women to cover up his alleged extramarital affairs. The Journal also reported that other women had come forward with sexual misconduct allegations. WWE amended its financial reports to reflect that payments McMahon denied all wrongdoing. His daughter helped take over leadership of the company in the interim, but McMahon Levesque resigned when her father, who owned a controlling stake in WWE, returned in early 2023. McMahon then engineered a deal to merge the company with the Endeavor Group's UFC to form TKO. Longtime Hollywood super agent, Ari Emanuel is the CEO of both Endeavor and TKO. And the rest of it kind of talks about the new era in WWE. Not too much stemming from the lawsuit, but it is in conclusion. And by the way, if you guys want to read the full article, it is linked in the description. Great work by NBC News there. But a lot of this, doesn't squarely have to do with the lawsuit, but it does kind of give you a perspective of, number one, where the defendant, Vince McMahon, is at in his life. Who's he still around? Who's he not around? And, is it a little bit salacious there where they were throwing in the kittens and the Trump? Like, a little bit, but I think it is important, or there were a lot of important bits in there to kind of, really think about, because this is a man who has defined pro wrestling. Like if we're being honest, Vince McMahon, for a very long time, and still to this day for many people, has defined professional wrestling, for better and a lot for worse. So when you have a figure like this going through this, and you have an industry that is basically impacted by the shadow of his alleged wrongdoings here, it's always going to be worthy talking about and delving into. As far as the lawsuit and where it goes from here, I think one thing that we will definitely see as we move forward is news about, I think Janelle Grant's lawyer, who did a recent interview, I believe, with WrestleNomics and the Post Wrestling, I think Janelle Grant's lawyer is probably going to be in the news a bit more, putting out more statements as they kind of gear up to at least present this to go to trial. We will see how long this takes, but another interesting update in this lawsuit. Guys, of course, if you haven't already done so, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Let me know what you guys thought of this in the comments section below. And until next time, keep it real.